Welcome back. Some time ago I told you that I had recently acquired a Model 336 Marlin in 35 Remington. But before I take it out and give you a peek, I just want to share my association with the Model 336. And it goes way back. Some of you have heard a little bit about this if you've been watching my series for some years. But I remember vividly, I was homesick as a dog with the flu back when I was a kid. My dad came home that evening with a stack of gun catalogs, and the 1964 Gun Digest by John T. Amber. And so I had a Remington and a Winchester and a Savage and a Marlin catalog to peruse. So between sniffles, I was going through every single page. But the catalog that really caught me was this Marlin catalog, and my memory's pretty clear on it. There was a lone cowboy out in the middle of the prairie with his chaps on and big old 10-gallon hat, and inside that catalog was a very, very appealing gun to me. I was a scrawny kid at the time, and I was in my early teens, and guns such as 30-30s and things like that were big medicine for me, and I didn't think I wanted to be shooting a 30-30. But when I saw this Model 336 Texan, I'll get my buddy Benny right here. Yeah, he came down to see me. He's a good boy. Yeah, he wants to get in on the video. But anyway, where was I? The 336 Texan was a straight-gripped model of the 336. Without the pistol grip, it had a straight lever. So it had that real Model 94 cowboy look, Model 92 cowboy look. And being in 44 Magnum and 44 Special chambering, it was something that I felt I could handle very handily. But being young at the time and certainly didn't have that kind of money, it was $79.95 for a brand new one. But I set my heart on it, and I wanted to get that gun in the worst way possible. So at the time, I was delivering newspapers, and it was a big route. I had a paper route that was Monday through Saturday. I delivered papers 6 days a week, and I had 80 papers on my route on average. And, I could sometimes ride my big Schwinn with big tires, 26-inch Schwinn. Sometimes I could ride that, with the big basket on the front and the 2 saddlebags on the side and carry my papers around. But a lot of times, I had to just simply walk it through my route. And the route was about 2.5 miles, encompassed 2.5 miles of walking, and plus I had to walk another 3 miles to get home because it took me nearly out of town. But I did that every day after school for an entire year, almost an entire year, in order to buy that gun. I wanted that rifle so badly. And I was also splitting up my money because I had to buy my lunch each day after I was, when I was out on the road delivering papers. So, that would consume some of my money. And I was also contributing to, room and board. That was the rule in the house, was if you were working, then you help support the house. So I was paying room and board to my parents. But anyway, I finally got the $79.95 all. And I have to really laugh because, paperboy fashion, I was saving it all in the currency that a paperboy works with. There was no folding currency except for Christmas tips. You got $1 for a Christmas tip, $2 if you were really lucky in some of the neighborhoods. But paperboy's currency was coins, so I was saving all my money in coin tubes. And so that's what I produced to the gun dealer. Was I had a shoebox that weighed probably 40 pounds, and I plopped that on the counter, and I think the guy he laughed. He said, "What am I supposed to do with that?" And but he took it, and my father chipped in the money for the ammo. I had forgotten entirely about the fact I had to buy ammo for the thing. I was only counting up $79.95. Well, anyway, I got the gun finally, and I had nothing but a blast with that gun. It was fantastic. My dad and I first took it out to a farm that we used to go to on occasion. This was my first centerfire gun, and I remember the farmer was he was pleased as punch to see me with my new rifle. So we knew him well, and he said, "Go out in the back. Go out in the back." And he says, "Down in the back pasture," he says, "there's an old 1932 Chevy down there." He says, "You can shoot at that." So I'm sure there's a lot of collectors right now that are cringing about the idea that we were putting holes in this old Chevy. But we unloaded a couple of boxes of ammo into the headlights and the tail lights and things like that, and did some offhand penetration tests. It was doing pretty well. But that was the story of my first .336 Marlin. That gun didn't fare so well. It lasted from the first year when I purchased it, 1964, until I think it was 1971 or 2 or something like that. But owing to the fact that it was built for a longer cartridge like the 3030 and that family of cartridges, the lifter that lifted the cartridges into place was quite long, and the ejection port is quite long to suit those cartridges. And so as a result, the relatively short 44 Magnum would bobble out the side if it didn't have some provision to catch it. So Marlin had incorporated a stop on the middle of that lifter. That was a spring-loaded stop that was riveted. It was kind of a sheet metal thing that was riveted in place. And it looked a little chintzy, and that might have been one of the reasons why Marlin finally discontinued it and went back to the model 1895 design, which was a pistol cartridge size rifle. But I never had any issues with it. Some people claimed that the cartridge would fall out the side and things like that if it was canted. But anyway, it was a gun that I regret that I had sold it shortly after I came home from the Army, after I came home from Vietnam, in favor of a .30-06. By that time, naturally, I wanted a stronger cartridge, so I bought myself a .30-06 and let that one go. But over the years, I've kind of always had that, it was the first gun I had. It was my first centerfire rifle. So I always had this nostalgic yearning to get another .336 made in that era. That was a wonderful era for Marlin. Marlin's .336 was basically the third generation of a design that started out with the model 1893, which was made until 1936. And then with slight incorporated changes, they made it. It became the model 1936, which was later just simply shortened to the model 36. That was made until 1948, when it was changed to the model 336 with a few minor design changes. It's a relatively simple action, as I'll show you. It's a very, very rugged action. It's known for its strength. And it's quite different in and its mechanism is very, very different than the Model 94, which shares many of the same cartridges and chamberings. But I looked for years. I over the years, I probably have seen 5 or 6 different .336 Texans for sale that were made the same era as mine, and in fact, a couple of them claimed to be made. I know that they were made, according to the serial numbers, they were made in 1964. Who knows, they might have even been the same rifle that I had. That was always something I kind of fascinated about, But recently, and of course I never bought them because usually the prices were out of line for, whatever I had on hand for cash. But recently I happened across one that was actually made in 1964, and it was a handsome gun. The stock had brilliant figuring, and boy, I almost threw a bid in on it, and it was the same Model 336 Texan with the straight grip and same chambering. But the same dealer, the same gun sales was also offering a 336 in 35 Remington. And, you know, I guess pragmatism got the best of my sentimentality, and I realized that 35 Remington is a more practical cartridge for hunting around these parts. And I was looking at it, and I kind of thought, gee, I'd like to get that 44 Magnum Texan, but maybe my luck would be not so good, and maybe it'd be one of these ones that doesn't work that well. So I decided on the 35. When I looked at all the pictures, there were a plethora of pictures for both of them. He had both of them up for sale at the same time, both made in 1964. So I settled on this one, and I put in some bids for it, and I got it. I mean, trust me, I wanted this gun, so I put in some bids for it that I knew would secure it. But this is I can't possibly explain the reason why this rifle has got this kind of wood. I hope that shows up. That's not Model 336 wood. I mean, it is Model 336 wood. There's no question about it. This is original stock. This is not something that's been refabricated or anything like that. This has got Marlin markings on the inside of the stock. But the figuring tells me that perhaps this was once owned by somebody who was a Marlin employee, somebody who had access to this kind of special stuff that you just don't see on the shelves. I've handled an awful lot of 336 Marlins in my years. I'd say probably hundreds of them over the years, and I've never once seen figuring like that. I've seen knife stocks, but Marlins are generally known for rather plain vanilla, black walnut, handsome walnut, but not the sort of figuring that you see on this rifle. Also, this rifle, it doesn't appear that it was ever carried afield. There's absolutely no wearing of the bluing anywhere whatsoever. It's got the original hooded front sight. There's no wear on the side of the hammer, indicating that it was if as a matter of fact the slight wear that's on there is what I've put on there since I purchased it. There was no loss of bluing on the side of that hammer. There's no indication of brass scuffing on this loading gate, nor is there any indication of brass scuffing on the inside of the receiver. Everything is just absolutely black, brand new, just like it was out of the factory today. And this is indeed a Model 336 made in 1964, the same as the one I had. Just as a matter of note, for those of you who are interested in knowing, pre-1968 Model 336s and Marlin lever actions had the serial numbers stamped, rolled onto the trigger guard tang, and the trigger mechanism tang. And in 1968, because of the Gun Control Act of 1968 requiring serial numbers to be affixed to the receiver of the firearm, they were moved to the top tang. So that's one of the features that will show a gun that was made prior to 1968. The Model 336 has had a long history. This started out with that Model 1893, and it became, which lasted until 1936, when it became the Model 3. It became the Model 36 shortly after the Model 1936, and which lasted until 1948, which became the Model 336, as I said. And the Model 336 has gone through a couple of significant changes. The biggest, of course, is the incorporation of, the first one is the change of that, well, actually, the very first change in the first Model 336s is the old waffle pattern that was incorporated on the tops of the receivers before they were drilled and tapped for scopes. And then finally, later on, in the later 50s, they eliminated the waffle top and it became a flat top, drilled and tapped for scopes. That serial number was moved from the trigger mechanism, the trigger housing tang, to the top receiver tang. This particular rifle here has this very handsome Western look, long wood on the front end rather than the steel capped fore end. So those are some of the changes that have been made. And if you look at the butt pad, there's no indication that it was ever stood on any hard surface or anything. This is such a absolutely lovely gun. I was so fortunate to get my hands on this one. And it's going to be shot. I'm going to be doing some shooting with it, and hopefully weather will settle down. We're getting an awful lot of rain coming through right now that's kind of quelling that. And I've been working on getting my garden put in and different things, and actually getting my boat spruced up and getting that ready for some fishing. Hopefully I can get out and do some striper fishing out in the ocean. But anyway, you know about the rifle. Now I just talk a little bit about the cartridge itself, the 35 Remington cartridge. There was a time. There was a time in Remington's history that I think lasted for quite a long time. But there was a period in Remington's history where it seems that they must have had an inferiority complex, I think, because it seemed like every time Winchester came out with a cartridge, Remington followed suit with one that was like it, ballistically, almost identically in many cases. But in a rimless version, Winchester came out with they came out with the 30-30, which is a rimmed cartridge, and Remington followed suit with the 30 Remington, which is a rimless cartridge. Then Winchester came out with the 32 Special, and the Remington came out with the 32 Remington, which was a rimless version of the same thing. And so it went, and because there was a 25 caliber, rimmed version of the Winchester cartridge, which was again, it was copied and made into a 25 Remington rimless cartridge. When it got to the 35 caliber, it's a little bit different story. Winchester was. They had a 35 Winchester, and it was a very potent cartridge, and it had a 250 grain bullet. Now the 35 Remington has a 200 grain bullet, and they also had Remington had I should say Winchester had a 33 Winchester. It seemed like they were trying to fill certain niches for any number of situations, fanciful situations, so virtually every imaginable caliber was covered by these different rimmed cartridges, which were followed suit by Remington's versions. So anyway, there was really no direct correlation between the 35 Remington and such a similar cartridge with Winchester, because either the diameter of the bullet, like there was a 375, I should say the 348 Winchester. There was the 33 Winchester, but the bullet weights and the diameters were different. Winchester's 35 was a much heavier gun, heavier caliber, heavier bullet. So anyway, but Remington came out with the model 1908 Remington, which became the Model 8 Remington, and then eventually the Model 81, and then that followed with the Remington. That was an auto loading. Then there was the Model 14, and then the Model 141, and then finally the 760. So Remington played with the 35 Remington for quite a number of years, and it's a ballistically similar cartridge to most of the Winchester kin. Here's a 32 special, Winchester special. Now, the 32 Winchester special's got 107. This is a 170 grain flat point bullet, and here's the 35 Remington. The case capacity on this 35 Remington is the practical case capacity is about 10% greater. Velocity is actually favor this the 32 special. The 32 special is about 100 feet per second faster than the 30-30. The 30-30 runs around 2,100 feet per second nominal velocity out of a 20-inch barrel. This is around 2,200 feet per second, 2,200 feet per second out of a 20-inch barrel. The 35 Remington claimed for many, many years that it had a muzzle velocity of 2,180. Well, you'd be doing well to get to 2,100 feet per second out of most rifles with the 35 Remington factory loadings and with any hand loads that I'm aware of. But it's a very good ballistically potent cartridge. Jack O'Connor once noted that if it wasn't for its diameter, it never would have gotten anywhere. But because it's a 35 caliber cartridge and that chugs along at in excess of 2,000 feet per second, it does some formidable damage to tissue without doing excessive meat destruction. So it makes it an ideal woodland deer cartridge. It has always been very, very highly regarded as a woodland deer cartridge. In fact, many countless moose have been taken with it in the Maine and New Hampshire woods and Canada. It's one of those cartridges that will never fail you within 150 yards. It's not a long-range cartridge. None of these cartridges should be ever considered. If you want to shoot at 200 yards or more, get a cartridge that's suited for 200 yards or more. But lever action rifles simply are not made for that kind of game, for that type of shooting. They're made with strapped together barrel and magazine tube, which inhibits accuracy. They're also, because of the fact that you have a magazine tube, cartridges can't be spire pointed. They can't be Spitzer pointed because they'll have chain detonation in the magazine tube during recoil. So there are a number of inhibiting factors that reduce the effectiveness of a lever action. Now I know that you have the Hornady, plastic tip bullets that will allow you to have a Spitzer style bullet in a magazine tube, and I've shot quite a number of them. I'm very, very, very familiar with them and their performance. And they have a theoretically improved ballistic coefficient for downrange shooting, but the practical advantage that you get you know, I should say the disadvantages outweigh the advantage when you start talking about having this this accuracy issue with these barrel bands, and the very fact that these barrel tubes, you know, are very, very light. If you take a barrel out of these Model 94s or Model 336s, there's not much to this barrel. It's not a heavy barrel whatsoever. So these are what they are. They're well-designed guns for the woodland shooter, for the shooter who's not anxious about taking shots beyond 125, 150 yards. That's where they excel. The cartridge is very, very well suited for that type of shooting. It's the same ballpark whether you're shooting a 32 special, 30-30, whatever it is, 35 Remington. You're talking about that type of very practical use. You know, some of the differences that this gun has to a Model 94 are significant, beside the fact that they share, you know, a knuckle-busting lever, and that's about as far as it goes in a tubular magazine. You know, overall styling, if you looked at them quickly, you might not notice some of the differences, but you know, John Marlin designed this rifle with this dropped ear, which allows the lever to be positioned relatively low in comparison to the receiver. And the receiver is a little bit wider in dimension here than it is on a Model 94. John Browning, on the other hand, used a different approach. He used a drop-down toggle link, which allows that lever to be brought lower to allow that swing to get the bolt back. So it was Browning's design was a more complex mechanism, and this is a far simpler mechanism because basically this is just a piece of steel that rides this bolt straight back in a slot. And this is also a two-piece firing pin back here. This is a design feature that provided for safety. This right here, the rear portion of the firing pin spring drops down under spring pressure to prevent forward travel of that impact of that firing pin until the bolt comes up and pushes that firing pin up. So the locking bolt will slide straight up, very similar to a Model 94, but it slides straight up and locks the bolt in place, but at the same time it lifts that the rear piece of that firing pin, and where it becomes in line with the forward section. So there's a considerable there's no similarity mechanically between the two, other than the fact that they have levers and hammers and bolts. It's the internal mechanism is much different. The Marlin system being, you know, fewer parts, it operates in cycles much smoother, and that was one of the things that caught my attention when I was a kid. You know, it just had that nice silky smooth feel, and this one here is really silky smooth. I think it was specially worked at the factory. But you know, this is not to say that this is a better mechanism. You know, they each have their attraction to different people. I'm attracted to both, to be very honest with you. I appreciate the silky smoothness of this action, but when it comes to carrying it, you can grab a hold of a Model 94 here. You can't grab this here very well because it's thick here, and this is not a place where you can grab it. So the Model 94, when you carry it around all day, it's a half-pound lighter. The Model 94 carries much easier here. This carries, once you fill the magazine tube up, it balances a little bit better. But this is a little bit more ungainly to carry around. the Model 94 is a little bit more ungainly to shoot. But you know, I'm a one-shot guy myself. I load up my rifle with one round in the chamber to shoot the deer, and if I happen to need the other two shots that are in the magazine tube, they're in there. But I have never had occasion to fire more than one shot at a deer. So because I take advantage of the one shot that's given me. If you can't get a good shot off with the first shot, the second and third aren't going to be any better once he's moving along at high tail speed. So the advantages of its mechanical action to me were always a moot issue. So the 336 Marlin, you know, it warms the cockles of my heart. It really does. It brings me back to my youth, to my very, very first rifle, my first centerfire rifle, and you know, it started out my shooting, and it was one of the very first. It was one of the first cartridges that I actually hand loaded for too, in 44 Magnum. So I know I'm going to have fun with this gun. I know it's going to be something to. I'll show you as soon as I can. I'll bring it out and we'll do some shooting with it together. But I love these. And here's my buddy Benny. What you doing, huh? He just loves. He must have been outside. He's all happy now. Is it still raining out? He's dry as a bone, so I guess it might be dry out. So that's it. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching and being supportive of my channel. And don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends about us. And God bless.